Awesome. Well, welcome and kia ora, everyone. Welcome to our panel of tackling diversity in the game industry space. We have some illustrious guests here. Can't wait for you to get to talk to them. So here, just to set our tone, the game industry is known as an industry with issues around inclusion and diversity, whether it's in the games themselves or the people and companies that work on them. Rather than focus on the negative and dwell on the past, we want to look at what it means to be a woman, POC, or member of the LGBTQ+ community in gaming now. What we're doing to ensure the industry to move forward, and what it means for the future of our games. So to start, I want to start from our left to our right. Becky, why don't you start?
Kia ora, I'm Raki Sayed. I am a lighter coming from the visual effects feature film background. I now work in immersive. I make VR in real time. I also teach at Victoria University of Wellington.
Very succinct. Hi, I'm Thomas. My pronouns are he, him, but I'm happy with any. I'm based in Christchurch. I work as a graphic designer, and I've worked in marketing and e-commerce for 5 years before kind of transitioning into games. I'm currently working with Nate on a New Zealand Film Commission funded project called Shelf Life, which is like a LGBTQIA+ focused RPG. And we co-founded Knife Games together.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm Sam Ramlu. I am a Fijian, Indian, Kiwi hybrid. My pronouns are she and her. And I am co-founder and managing director of Method, which is a service-based interactive studio, as well as co-founder of a AR/VR game studio called M Theory. And we're currently working on a joint venture with Oddboy, which is another game studio, on a VR game called Wanderer. And yes, so I've got all that going on.
Hi, I'm Nate. My pronouns are he, him, they, them, and I'm the writer, co-director of Knife Games with Thomas. I went to university and did a sculpture degree, which I don't use very often in the games industry, because I mostly did ceramics, and now I work in a call center in my day job. But yeah, I also have a background in comics, and yeah, and I don't know what else to say. I'm the writer. Did I say that? Yes, I did. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm also the writer.
Right.
Hey everyone, I'm Xia Liu. I'm a 3D artist specializing in creating realistic environment and props. I came to New Zealand when I was 15 years old, and I've been working in the game media industry for about 2 years now.
Kia ora whanau. My name's Tama. I'm from the East Coast, Apanui. I came down here to study media design and always dreamed about doing game stuff, but never really thought there was going to be an opportunity, like realistic. So I kind of went to video production, started a business with my friends called the Multi-Side Steps. Here they are. And we've been doing TV, media stuff recently. And just in the last few years, the Film Commission started backing games and, trying to get little startups off the ground with their funds. And so I've just been working on a couple of video game projects with them. And here we are, I guess. Thanks everyone for coming. I guess we got our own mic.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah. So again, hi, I'm Audrey Tops Harjo. I'm the COO of A44 Games and also the founder of Inclusion FX. You can find us online. So let's just get started. So to the panel, what do you consider the biggest issue right now in terms of personally for you and diversity and where you are in your space?
Why do I always have to start? I think as a researcher and educator, one of the challenges that I see is like supporting those early career artists to catapult into the industry. And so what we have to do when we invite students to be to be in our master's program, which is a master's program that's focused on visual effects, is how do we evaluate for diversity so that we can catapult them into that space. And I think we have to reevaluate what we think a portfolio is. It's straightforward for us to take a student that has all the best skills already, will make a great film that will win awards and that will go jettison right into the industry, right? We know how that works. We know what those reels look like. And I think for us is we have to dig a little bit deeper and find out what about those students that have stories to tell that don't have those technical skills already, and then the work that will be required on our part to help them get to that technical level, which is actually a less challenging position to be in. I think the embodiment of like, I'm an artist, I have a story to tell, I have a vision, that's like the harder part, that once a student has that, like I'm happy to support and do that work to get their technical skills up to level.
Cool.
Awesome. I guess from my perspective, with regards to like queerness in games, I come from a sort of fine arts school background, and I remember feeling very like discouraged from making artwork that was like personal or artwork that explored themes of sexuality or gender identity. And other people at art school were also discouraged from exploring themes like culture or personal identity in general, which was like kind of troubling. And so I think what I would like to see in the sector in general for games and art is like more personal projects, more people feeling encouraged and sort of are rewarded for putting their own sort of personal spins on their games and on their narratives, and kind of going beyond like classic kind of platformers or shooters, and you know the sort of which are totally fine, but it would be nice to have them with additional components of personal elements to them, as well as sort of like Aotearoa kind of perspectives too. So it's not just like living in a nebulous sort of American adjacent zone that's not very Kiwi.
Yeah, understood.
I've got a few too many here, but I'll try and keep it to a short few. But of course, just diversity and representation within games. You know, at the moment, it still very much feels like a bit of tokenism and, you know, box ticking. And to be fair, I think we kind of need to do that on purpose and be very purposeful about it to get to the next stage where it is a lot more organic. And I think we talk about it later, but I think we need to move from being, we need to move into anti-racism. It's a term that, you know, I've come across kind of more recently, but actually being anti-racist rather than kind of, so I think it's more about just speaking out about it loudly. And so one of the other things that I think is kind of one of the key things now is actually just talking about it. I think it's actually really hard. And even just all of us being here, I think is amazing to be able to talk about it, but it's very uncomfortable conversations to have, to put yourself out there. It's easier as a leader to do that and put it, bring it down through the team. But if you're not a leader, how do you bring up some of these issues? It's easier to do it in a one-on-one situation with friends and have those debates. It's a lot harder when everyone's staring at you, to talk about some of these issues and actually really get quite personal about it. You know, there's a lot of very personal lived experiences, and it's, and it is very much a cathartic thing when you hear other people saying, yes, I had that experience and this is what happened to me, but I don't think we talk about it enough to even get to that point.
Oops.
Is it on? Yes,
Yeah.
go. Sort of building upon what Sam just said with diverse representation and talking about it, like especially in the industry, there seems to be a lot of times when they put these token characters in, but they don't ask anyone from those backgrounds, they don't talk to them, or like, I don't know if it's just because they're scared to ask questions or if they've never thought to ask questions, but definitely more discussions and engagement and just paying for consultation from people from those backgrounds if you want to talk about those issues, or just like hiring or collaborating with people from those backgrounds as well in your team. That would be really cool, because that's like one big thing is if you don't see representation of yourself in the games or in the people making the games, then you don't know that you could be one of those people as well. And I think that you're just being able to see people doing it themselves inspires other people to go do it too.
Can I just jump in quickly? But I think another point on that is, I think there's a lot of really good intent out there of people wanting to bring diversity and characters or whatever, stories in, but then they're too scared to reach out because they don't know if they're necessarily going to be approaching it properly, and so they don't, and so then it's not included. And so I think that's the thing, is we shouldn't be scared to ask some of these questions. We've got very much this cancel culture thing going on, and I think there's some fear of sometimes putting yourself out there and saying something because you're worried about the potential backlash, but it means then you're not open to change or to listening to others' opinions.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Chile, I have a question for you. Since you're new to the industry, I wanted to see your experience, and have you felt any kind of barrier being a young Asian woman in the very tech-heavy side of the industry?
Yeah. So personally speaking, I mean, I've only been in the industry for 2 years, and I've only been working for different groups of people or companies. And just from my personal opinion, it's been awesome. It's been really awesome. I've never felt like I was treated differently because I'm a female, I'm international, or anything like that. I say just add on top of the point Sam and Nate was bringing up. I think this might be one thing as 3D artists. Sometimes to me, I just feel like there's not enough content that are appealing towards to the more niche type of group of people. Like when I'm looking at tutorials and such, most of the time especially for 3D artists, it will usually be sci-fi, very masculine content. And I think it's just I think the thing that kind of I feel that was stopping me the most was that I wasn't really able to find tutorials that are directly targeted towards to the things that I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess I can only speak from my experience. And I've been quite fortunate, I suppose, having most of my close friends that are working in the games industry being either indigenous to Fiji or Māori. We've got Kat Lintott out there and Tuakana. And I think the only issues I've come into contact with are actual kids not knowing not knowing how easy and accessible it is to get into gaming. All you probably need is a nice fancy laptop, and then you can kind of download Unreal Engine for free.
Yep.
And go to YouTube University, like I did after I went to university and kind of missed out on the gaming kind of streams. And the second issue I've kind of come across is that because it's such a new industry, and in Te Ao Māori, a lot of the iwi kind of still have a bit of resentment toward other tribes for the stories and how they're told. So we haven't really got to a point where we can tell our stories without consulting with every tribe around New Zealand. So we're kind of forced to take our culture outside of the context of New Zealand and create fictional places where our stories can be told.
I have a question for you. So why do you need to, I wouldn't say distill, but why isn't it okay to just have that one particular voice instead of having to have all of them? Just is it because that there's not enough stories to go around, or you feel that there needs to be this cultural collaboration? Why isn't it your personal, your family story just as important as someone else's, and why can't you just go for it with that?
There's probably too many stories to go around for it to be one cohesive story. So just for an example, my iwi battled over Whakaari or White Island up north, and there's still a bit of unclear kind of a lead story as to who won the battle and who lost the battle. So it's still a bit of a
contention,
a touchy subject to start telling stories about.
Understood.
But I think as soon as the gaming sector comes to the forefront of our entertainment here in New Zealand, Māori will jump in and actually kind of see how we can use the industry as a entertainment and educational purpose, and kind of also get some sovereignty and create more Māori business out of it, I suppose.
Yeah. I think that leads into the next question. So what do you see for the future? Like, you know now, but how can we make this better for the next generation? I know we talked about talking through it, we having those difficult conversations, and even now it's hard for, especially in those tech sections where we're only 3% of that larger collective. It's like, well, this doesn't affect me, so why am I hearing about it?
I mean, one thing that I want to say is that, like, in the 10 years that I spent working in the feature film industry, first in feature animation and then visual effects, I never once worked on a team with a female VFX supervisor at the top.
Yes.
Never. And that was, those are like really startling facts that I had to sit with when I left the industry.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why I started working in VR, because there were no rules. There were no rules.
I can tell you now that Sheena Dougal just finished Venom 2, the first, so.
Yeah, I mean, they're out there for sure. But I never had the pleasure to be on a team like that. And so I never saw myself in that particular role, because that was just like the lived reality.
Yeah.
But as soon as I started working in the immersive space, like, you know, Kat was one of the first people I met. She invited me to come and start doing stuff with Wrestler. And it became clear to me that in New Zealand in particular, but in a lot of other places, like a lot of these VR studios, Sam, of course, as well, like they're being led by women. And so women are really having, shaping the space in a way that's going to change the way we perceive it. And that to me was the reason why I knew that this was the medium that I want to work in. And it's been, you know, I think it's totally changed the energy and the barriers to seeing yourself and telling your own story.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Cool. I feel like in terms of like where things should be or where things should be heading towards, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially because of how interesting it is to be queer online during like Pride Month, when all of the various companies changed their logos and then changed them back super abruptly. And it makes me think about like whether, and this is kind of like beyond just game studios, but I think it, you know, relates to all of it, whether or not these companies and studios and like workplaces are willing to actually commit to diversity beyond like what's profitable and convenient or what seems easy, or like, you know, whether you can sort of achieve like getting the rainbow tick by doing like a few kind of measly efforts. So I suppose I would like to see a little bit more awareness from managers and studio heads and people around like maybe what it's like for people in their team who are going through some kind of like transitional period, maybe some sort of like gender discovery journey, or maybe there's a bit more awareness around how pronouns could affect people in the workplace, and just a bit more discussion around things like that.
Yeah. Just to give you space, right? That's all we're asking for, is just space, because we are here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're part of the collective, and we have a voice, and that voice is needs to be. I shouldn't say need. I'm getting Black Panther here. I'm sorry, but you know, it needs to be heard.
Yeah.
Because what we have to say is important, and I know sometimes it gets drowned out because of the collective. Forgive the pun, white noise. But I just wanted to tell you, you know, that. But no, keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's kind of, yeah. Nate might elaborate.
I mean, I said it before in terms of going beyond tokenism, but I think some of the things that are happening, you know, and it goes across our everything, not just games. I mean, everything from, sounds really funny, but like makeup, you know, I've really struggled to find the right color for my skin. And so it was a very tokenistic gesture to have that. And in games like The Sims, when you're creating your character, again, those shades aren't necessarily the right ones, and they've started to improve that. There's this natural inclination, like we've just made a game recently where you have a character creator, and there's, you know, you see a lot of these, and I guess it becomes second nature to see the first character that you see as a white male. That is the default, and I guess we've got to change that default. And so, you know, I'm a little bit older, I think, than most of the panel, and so I've seen it move and change as well. You know, I didn't see myself, I mean, I still don't see a lot of people who look like me leading studios, or, you know, come from an agency background, but it just wasn't there. And it wasn't something for me to kind of it wasn't something that I noticed. It was just something that I did. And I think, you know, again, there's probably people, though, that do notice. And so if you don't see yourself in this space, how can you create in this space? How are you comfortable creating in that space? You almost become one of those people who go to the default, who write Western names as your character names because that's what you see. You know, and so I think it's taking yourself out of that because you become so used to it and so adapted to it, to kind of have some of those tough conversations. VR is a really interesting space as well because, you know, you look down and you see hands in VR, and that's when it really hits you. You look down and you see white male hands, and you're like, this is not me. You know, how can you? How do you? Yeah, and so what can you do? And in Wanderer, you know, we've got you go in and you take on another character, and you're female, you're brown, you're white, you've got gloves on, but you know, there's all these different ways you can tackle it, and to me it feels like this is where we just need to be a bit more natural and organic about it, rather than going, oh, I have to make sure that this is included, but also having the right people on board to do that, you know, rather than just thinking that you can manage all of that yourself.
Yeah, that's good. So listen, I don't want to run out of time before I open up for questions, because I know you guys all want to hear. I definitely want to hear what, if you have any questions for the panelists. Do you guys have any questions? Look on the app. Looking on the app.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we got questions. I love it. All right, let's go.
What would be your number one most actionable step as a leader or otherwise that a leader or otherwise can implement into their life right now?
What is the most actionable step a leader can? Could you read it one more time?
What would be your number one most actionable step a leader or otherwise can implement into their life right now?
Just try to be a little bit more, I guess, aware of what kinds of inner worlds might be occurring with the people that are working underneath you, and like try not to, I don't know, make super like lame assumptions about people. I don't know.
I think the first thing is just to look at your team. There are a lot of voices in your team. You know, it depends how big your team is, but I've heard a lot in the last couple of days about, you know, certain values that companies have of diversity and inclusion, and it's a really interesting one to me because I've never felt like I've had to have that as a value, because we naturally have that, and maybe that's because of, you know, who's leading our studio. Yeah. But I mean, I think maybe that's something that should be considered, maybe not as a value, but just an inherent way of your company running, of every company running. But I think that's the other thing, is my lived experience is just my lived experience. You know, there's a whole lot of other people in our team who've got their own lived experiences, so just talking to them, hearing from them. You know, I've heard a lot about just listening and taking time to listen. I think that's really, really important.
Okay, that's great. Next question.
I want to answer this.
Yeah.
Is there a person you look up to as a spokesperson for inclusion and diversity more broadly? I look up to you, Audria, for sure. I mean, the stuff that you're doing with IFX is like really, really necessary and cool.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about IFX for a minute?
Yes. So, you know, I've been in the industry for about 25 years. I started off as a filmmaker. I worked in Los Angeles for about 18 years. I worked at Sony Pictures and worked in Hughes, Cinesite, Weta. I went to all those places, Avatar and, you know, Lightstorm. And what the common denominator is that it was really me. You know, I was the only one producing. I was the only digital producer. I managed Contacts a long time ago. I'm dating myself. Yes, all of you guys were probably 5 when I was on that film. And it was tough because I was leading a huge team, and my logo is actually kind of a black unicorn in a triangle, because I was usually the only one, and I usually had to produce magic in order to keep my job. But that, you know, it was a little lonely, and I at this point in my career, I really wanted the help of Derek Bradley and the support of A44. I was able to expand that and reach to the other generations and know that all these amazing people I've worked with, they've had a voice. And we've been kind of quiet because, you know, you go through all the wonderful VFX soup, like Reiki we've all worked with, and we're not represented. It's like we didn't exist. So I wanted to change that and highlight all these amazing people. So next, in 2 weeks, we're going to have the South Pacific edition with some of the most of the people in illustrious panels are going to be telling their stories. And yeah, that's really what the calling is, to really amplify those voices. Yeah.
So this is a question that's being asked a couple of different ways. How would a team or company approach making diversity a priority without alienating those who self-identify as non-diverse?
He's like, I don't answer that.
I actually have a suggestion for this, hopefully better than my last terrible answer. So I wanted to plug this. There's actually a charity that works in Wellington called Inside Out, who provide like resources and information and workshops and consulting for anything that's like LGBTQ+. And they will work with schools and workplaces, community organizations. They also have lots of resources on their site. I know it was brought up in a previous panel the other day, like if you're looking for ways to, improve that will, that you can action on and not struggle with. I think being able to bring in some outside help is probably a good call.
I also wanted to say that everyone is an individual and a different person, and you might think that you might not be diverse, but there are lots of qualities in yourself. There might be mental health things or things in your life, your class or your financial situation that puts you in a position that makes you not like the default person, and like your perspective is also important as well.
Yes.
And like, so there's so many perspectives that are important, and I think that in a production lead position or a manager position, just like talking to people and also being willing to take risks. The big like indie games that do really well and make change across the industry are ones that have taken risks and done things that are personal and interesting. So just talking to all of your individual people and letting them, like everyone's got something interesting to say from every perspective. So yeah, just opening the floor and allowing for that is cool. And also people change over time. Like,
Yeah.
you never know when someone's going to come out as trans. So
Yep.
you might think that you're non-diverse, but who knows? We might get you.
Next.
What are examples that have helped give you space or feel more included and or represented? And it would be good to hear from some other folks, but I will just say that I think like what's cool about this moment is that you can find your tribe in these places where they don't appear to be. And so a couple of years ago, I really wanted to start thinking about this like issue of anti-racism in a way that I could help. And so I thought, what does anti-racism and visual effects mean? How do we understand, how do we have that conversation? And so I started doing some reading around it, and I found this really great article written in Science Magazine by Dr. Ted Kim, who used to work at Pixar and is now a computer science researcher at Yale. And I just wrote to him, and I was like, this is really cool. This is the research that I'm doing. This is my practice, and I would love to talk to you. And we just started collaborating, and next week we're going to have a panel at CGRAPH where we talk about anti-racist visual effects. And it's really great. Like, you can reach out to these people, and it's surprising how many people you thought were not there in these places where these conversations aren't happening that have these, that want to have this conversation. So if anyone's coming to CGRAPH next week, please come to that panel as well. The question was, what are examples that have helped give you space or feel more included and represented?
I'd just like to thank the Film Commission, really. They really stepped up their game. They did drop it for a year, but I think they've realised how integral their fund was for the interactive space. And a lot of us on here are quite involved in that same fund, right? I guess I've gone out to the industry and kind of found my family and found who I, have the most fun with in the room, writing stories and writing ideas and skits and stuff. And I think finding your family is probably the best best thing, because with that family you can build a foundation that then you can use to leverage other opportunities, and yeah, I guess start from there.
Yeah.
I think one thing I can think of for me is it's just so it's more like focusing on how can you help this person to achieve their own goal. Like, for example, for the places I've worked at before, including my current places, the lead artist has always been like trying to give the team member the task that they are personally very interesting. And that's, to me, that's like you have no, like it's not judging you in any way, and it's not really, it's trying to be like helping you in a way that what you want to achieve. And they are not really trying to like push you to this way or that way to try to change or modify you. And to me, that's really like supporting you to be who you want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's
fantastic.
What can studios do to attract more diverse candidates to their job openings?
That's a good, it's one thing. We talked about a little bit about this at the meeting yesterday. It's not just attracting the talent, it's keeping it, right? So when you go into those spaces and you've asked them to come, and you need to create space for them, because being different, like you said, I mean, there's differences, right? There's internal differences as well as external, and external ones are easy to find. But I think it's just challenging to make that, especially in a very communal space. I mean, New Zealand is very communal, and there's wonderful things about it, but there's also the darker side, which is if you don't fit into this collective. I equate it to like the shunning of the Amish. It's like you will turn your backs. But I mean, I'm being dramatic. But it's just tough. It's tough to kind of to get your mental fortitude of like what that isolation feels like. And I can't describe enough what that feels like when you're kind of the only one in the room that looks like you or feels like you or in that orientation is you. You have to kind of really work a little bit harder than the rest of the rest of the collective. So I think that's the next question. So once you get them in, and once you have that wonderful splash on your website, and the values match, they do a wonderful interview, and they do a fantastic job. It's like, well, how do you support them when they get into your studio? And that's a great question.
I just wanted to add, I think, again, it came up yesterday, but I think you have to be overt about it.
Yeah.
Like you have to say, we are an inclusive studio, and I think it sounds weird to put that, it's almost like a given, but I think there are some people that if they don't see that, they're not sure. They don't know the ins and outs of your studio. So I think you have to overtly be there and say that. I think one of the things that came up yesterday as well, someone brought up, was just going outside of the usual recruitment methods as well, and actually really reaching out to those communities. Again, there's a comfort level within those communities, and you may not necessarily be on Seek or Trade Me looking for those roles. So how can you go out and reach out to some of those people, using your network, reaching out to people as well?
I also think that the way that you do your listings is also important, because there's I don't know the statistic, but a certain statistic, if there's a role where it says you need all these qualifications, men are more likely to apply for it even if they don't have those qualifications, where women aren't.
Yeah.
So maybe being less you need to have 5 million years experience in this industry before you even think to speak to us. Being more open about that probably would. Also being more open to just having someone who might not have tertiary experience in that area. They might be self-taught and be amazing. So being open to just structuring your job listing in a way where it opens for other people to want to apply to it. Yep. And for keeping people, making sure that you allow them to have adequate appointment time, as was said yesterday in one of the other talks. Yeah. And just good sick leave and personal leave is very important for and not crazy hours as well.
Right. That's a given.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that.
I mean, one thing that I'd like to talk about is cluster hiring. If you want to diversify your student body or even your staff, don't just hire one. hire a number of people that come in together so that they have that collective energy and they're automatically not the only one. And that's also, to me, that's making a real statement and an investment.
Good point.
And the fact that the institution has strategized to make all of these things come together at this one time. So in universities, there's a lot of research around this, and like the kind of strategy and long-term thinking. It's also a long-term investment, and it has to be treated that way as well.
That's a good point.
Here's another question. How do we have difficult conversations? And I think this person is asking it in the context of like personal conversations when people disagree, but I think difficult conversations in the workplace are really important as well.
So for me, again, I'm an American, you guys. Directness is no problem for me, but you try to, I think, try to find a space which is safe for both of them, to listen, to be there without judgment, to really hear what the issues are, and then really be clear about what those expectations. So for me, especially when I'm working with a person who works with me, it's like you make sure that they have clear objectives and what you expect of them, because everybody wants to do a good job. I mean, they're not there to fail. And if they're having difficulty, it's your job to support them and make sure that you give them what they need. I mean, that's really management in the service sector. I mean, that's pretty much what we do. But those are hard, but in an environment where we make something that's going to be set to sell, and there's a world expectation of what that looks like, and we're here to hit a certain artistic or aesthetic vision set out by our creative directors. And what does that look like? And can you meet those objectives? And if you can't, it's really up for us to tell them as quickly as possible so that we can help and support them instead of saying, "Oh, let's see how this goes." I don't know if that's healthy. So I always opt for just being really, really gentle and clear and supportive as possible. But those conversations need to be had, in my opinion. Somebody must have that different opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting discussion out there right now. There's a book called "Disagreement is Not Violence," and I think that's a really important thing to start to talk about, is that we can not agree and still have fruitful discussions, and it's the polarization of the moment that we're at that makes it feel like we can't disagree.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I just want to say one more thing on that, is that there's also different ways to communicate, and I think different people have different ways of communicating. So making sure you've got all those different avenues. Some people might be better in a one-on-one chat situation, or, we have obviously a whole lot of different things available to us in terms of online communications tools. But I think some people are more comfortable writing something in a text or a message as their first point of contact, before you maybe have that conversation. That might not be something they're comfortable doing straight away. So I think just making sure people understand that there are different ways they can talk to you. With my team at Method, we have one-on-ones, and I reach out to everyone. And if someone doesn't want to have one that month, that's fine, But there are some people on the team I have one-on-ones with them every month, and then others who go, every 3 months is okay. And I think let them help manage that as well, instead of going, I'm having a meeting with you every month regardless, So I think it's a two-way thing. And I guess with that comes that understanding that if you do some regular things, hopefully you can nip something in the bud before it kind of becomes a real big issue.
I think also, creating like a company culture of the way that you bring up issues, like instead of saying, this thing you did was really awful, like rephrasing it to being like, oh, like kind of not using like attack phrases when you've got an issue, saying like, I felt this way when you did this thing, when you talked about the project in this way, it made me feel this way. And then if everyone in the company is all discussing things like that, it's less attacky, and because people get horrible when they get defensive.
Yes.
And they don't say things that they really mean.
Yeah.
So if you have, develop a way of talking between your colleagues and within the company structure, then it's a lot easier for people to take the feedback, and also for people to give constructive feedback. And it does make everyone more comfortable to be able to, challenge things that might be a problem.
I think that's excellent, because people don't hear when their emotions are high. right? They don't hear you, even if you're speaking logic or hearing something they desperately need to hear. All they get is emotion, and you've kind of lost at that point. Yeah.
I guess that's about creating a culture that fosters that kind of discussion and language. Here's a question: How do we push for diversity as an employee and not as a director?
I think just to try not to fit in, because just coming from a different culture and such, a lot of times my colleague would be talking about things that really, that's like heavily about Kiwi culture or like Western culture that sometimes I wouldn't certainly be able to get a joke or get the content of what they're talking about. And instead of trying to pretend that just laugh along, I think it's really good to just be like, oh, can someone explain it to me? Like, oh, I didn't quite get it. And just to don't be afraid to make a joke from your culture, or like just to trying to bring your culture in as well, telling people, educating them what something about your culture, because some people will actually be appreciating them. And instead of trying to fit in, I think it's just really just to bring something in, to try to be yourself. And that's, as an employee, that's what you can do. And I think as employers, you kind of just need to passively trying to like support that in a way, to be more open, I guess.
That's a hard one. 'Cause as an employee, you kind of really don't have a hard. You can't really force companies or whatnot to see things from your point of view. But I guess the best you could do is share your point of view and not be afraid of it, and not be intimidated by the structure that you're in at your situation.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's all I got for that.
We're sorry about that. That was amazing. That's fine. Yeah, cool.
I was just going to say, from the perspective of like a student who's been, pushed down to not make like diverse content, I think thinking back on it now, I wish that I'd like kind of pushed harder and tried to find someone like within the faculty who could be an ally or like could encourage me or be interested, instead of just allowing myself to be massively discouraged. But that's way easier said than done, obviously. It's really hard.
I don't know that I see too many more questions. I mean, there's this comment that I made saying y'all are awesome, but five other people have agreed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Before we go, any live questions? You guys have any other questions for the panel? Just as a work or? All right. Well, listen. This has been a pleasure. Any final words from our panelists?
Make really cool, diverse games.
Yep.
I just wanted to say, I think serve the story you're working on. Would be, because I was trying to think of, you guys didn't let me in to answer some of those questions earlier, but I think when you're facing issues at the workplace, remember the project is kind of bigger than yourself and the rest of your team, and if you're having those tough conversations and you're getting personally defensive about other people's opinions, I guess from the other people's perspectives, they kind of need to structure their criticism or their critique around what's best for the project first and foremost. Maybe give you a shit sandwich, excuse my French, but say something good, nice piece of crust. Say what's bad and then say what's good again about it, and so people don't reach that defensive mode and then start to lash out in the office. But that's
cool. That's great.
Thanks for having me, guys, and the rest of the team here.
Well, listen. Well, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate you hearing their stories. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.